Rabbi. Hi, David. John.
Hello, Kent.
Trying to get the text up. Give me a moment. Okay. See, even international websites make spelling mistakes. Beit Hamikdash, spelled B-I-A-T. Here
Yeah.
again, Biat. Oh no, sorry. My mistake. It's not Beit, it's Biat. It's correct. I apologize. Biat means coming into the temple.
Oh,
Today we're going to talk about those who have imperfections and therefore may not serve in the temple. And I must say, I've been doing Rambam for I don't know how many years, a couple of decades every day. And every year it's like I'm seeing something for the first time. It's quite amazing. I saw something today which I'm struggling with, which I'll share with you when we get there. Okay, so you actually began this yesterday, for those of you who were at the shir yesterday. Yesterday, the Rambam spoke about blemishes or imperfections, physical blemishes, it's called in Hebrew, it's called a mum, which would disqualify both humans and animals. So there are many physical blemishes which are the same for a human and an animal. For an animal to be offered as a sacrifice on the altar of God in the temple, it has to be complete, it may not be blemished. And for a Kohen to serve in the temple, he has to be in good shape, because can you imagine if the guards at Buckingham Palace were hunchback or limping or whatever, they would never make the grade in Buckingham Palace. So why should they, it's sort of not very honorable and respectful for God's palace, for the Beit HaMikdash. I hasten to add that every human being, regardless of their physical challenges, is a holy soul, and that doesn't take away anything from the infinite value of every human being. But if you're there as a guard, as the palace guard, so to speak, then you got to be able to stand tall and straight and march in formation and hold your rifle properly, etc. And likewise with the Beit HaMikdash, out of respect and honor to Hashem, likewise those who are involved there in the services may also not have any physical blemishes, though they might be spiritually holy people. Okay, so it's not saying that they are not worthy individuals, God forbid. We're just saying that this particular service is not appropriate for them. They'll find other things. In fact, they did find other things in the temple for people who were blemished in one way or another and were unable to serve. They found them other jobs to do in the temple, which didn't require them to be involved directly in the services. You know, like in when there's a war and they're drafting soldiers, some people are get a medical exemption because they're flat-footed or something? Are they less of a human being because they're flat-footed? No, but the army wants only people who have no problem running or whatever it might be. And so what do they do with those people who have physical exemptions? They put them to work in on the civil side, digging trenches or helping out in the cities, whatever it is. So likewise in the temple, they gave them other things to do. So yesterday, you read that there are 50 physical blemishes that disqualify both humans and animals. So 50 are common to humans and animals, like a broken leg or something, yeah? Could be an animal breaks a leg or a human breaks a leg. Both would disqualify them from being serving in the temple or being offered on the altar. Now he brings 90 physical blemishes that disqualify humans alone. So the previous chapter was common to humans and animals, man and beast. This chapter is only for man, not for beast. Although it's 90, but it'll go quite quickly. So don't, we'll finish on time, if not early. Total of 90 physical blemishes disqualify humans alone, and they are. And we go through the body. 8 involving the head. Now, some of these things you can relate to and identify as something you've seen, and some things you've probably never seen, and some things are quite weird and far from wonderful. But you'll just have to use your imagination because I haven't seen this all either. And I don't have any diagrams or graphics for you, so we'll just have to use our imagination. So 8 blemishes that involve the head. If the center of his forehead is depressed below as if it was pushed down with one's hand. Okay? So if God forbid the person's forehead is pushed in. Have you ever seen someone like that? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. 2, the center of his forehead raised up above. The first one was that it's pressed below. And this one is that it's pressed up like an egg, which is narrow on top and wider on bottom. C, one who has the sides of his head emerged towards his face like a hammer. What does that mean? Anybody have an idea? The sides of his head emerged towards his face like a hammer. Not quite sure how to describe that. 4, one whose head projects outward abnormally from his neck. 5, one whose head is abnormally large to the extent that it sits on his neck like a turnip on top of its leaves. F, one who is bald and has no hair whatsoever on his head. If, however, he has a row of hair extending across the back of his head from ear to ear, that's fine. So now, I mean, some of us may be bald, present company included. So does that mean you have a blemish? God forbid, we're not saying you're a blemished person. And maybe, I mean, today it's very fashionable people shave their heads today. It's like a fashion statement. You know the story of the guy who went into the barber shop. He said, "How much is a haircut?" He said, 100 rand. "How much is a shave?" 50 rand. He said, "Shave my head." Now, okay, so most people have some hair somewhere. He's saying, hey, you have to be completely bald. Person whose hair extends from ear to ear on the front of his head, but is bald on the remainder of his head, is unacceptable. The person whose hair extends around his entire head from front to back, but he has no hair on the top of his head, is also deemed bald and unacceptable. Okay. I'm starting to lose my hair, but fortunately, it's under my yarmulke. So if I wouldn't tell you, you wouldn't know. Let's hope it stays under the yarmulke. Could be in years to come, my yarmulke is going to have to get bigger and bigger.
Have to wear a hat.
Well, there are two blemishes involving the neck. One whose neck is sunk into his trunk so much that it appears to be placed on his shoulders. One whose neck is so long that it appears unconnected with his shoulders, two opposites. 4 involving the ears, one whose 2 ears are very small, one whose are swollen like sponges. I don't know why he chooses sponges as an example. One whose ears hang down low, like the Zulus with this thing. What are those things they put inside their earlobes, those Zulu guys?
Yeah,
Their
cotton
necks?
reel. Cotton reels.
Cotton reels. That's what you call it. What do the Zulus call it? By them, by them, it's shechus. One who has one ear different from another in appearance. 5 involving the eyebrows, one who does not have any hair at all on his eyebrows. Giben is a word in the Torah used for this. One whose eyebrows hang low, one who has only one eyebrow, one who has more than 2, that's quite unusual. One who has one eyebrow different from the other, whether one is long and one is short, one is black and one is white or red, or the difference in appearance, unacceptable. By the Kohanim, for duchening, if a Kohen has problems, blemishes on his hands, it also says he shouldn't duchen. Why? Because the blemishes will, so the strangeness of it, because it's unusual, people will stare, and they'll stare at the Kohen instead of concentrating on the blessings. So that could also be part of the disqualification here as well. Eyelids, doesn't have any hair at all, has very thick hair, has an eyelid whose hair is different from that of the other eyelid. Did we say that? No. One is black, one is white, one is thin, one is thick, or one whose eyelids are closed slightly and do not open wide like those of other people. That I have seen actually. Some people they look like they have a permanent squint. 11 involving the eyes themselves. We spoke about eyebrows and eyelids, now the eyes themselves. 2 eyes are positioned above their appropriate place, close to the forehead. 2 eyes are positioned below their appropriate place. 2 eyes are round and not extended slightly as other eyes are. They're actually round. Now, our eyes, on Sukkot, we said that the 4 species correspond to different parts of the body, remember? The esrog is the heart, the lulav is the spine, the aravis are the lips, and the hadassim, the myrtle, are the eyes. Now, it's spherical. It's sort of wider than taller. And it's not perfectly round. A perfectly round eye is unusual. One whose eyes pop out like the eyes of a tiger. I've never looked a tiger in the eye, to be honest. And like the eyes of a person who looks at someone when he's very angry. He's so angry, his eyes were popping out of his head. Yeah, you heard that expression. So if a guy looks like that all the time, there's something wrong. Here's E is interesting. There's a Yiddish expression. I don't know if you have heard it. Guckt auf mir mit kelbene Augen. Kelbene Augen. Eyes like a kalb is a calf. One whose eyes are very large like those of a calf. Kelbene Augen. One whose eyes are small like those of a duck. One who is continuously tearing. That's interesting. I myself have an eye that tears. I'm always using tissues. But I would hope that it would not be continuous. Anyway, I'm not a Kohen, so don't worry. One who has fluid continuously dripping from the tip of his eyes near his nose or the ends of his eyes near his temples. One who contracts his eyelids and squints slightly when he sees light or when he wishes to look at something carefully. I've seen people who have poor eyesight to do that. And here's a classic, somebody who's cross-eyed, to the extent that he sees 2 stories of the same building as one. What about if he sees one building like 2? This defect can be noticed when such a person is speaking with another one and it appears like he's speaking with someone else, right? I'm sure you've experienced that. I mean, I'm sure we've all met people who are cross-eyed. It's not so uncommon. They're talking to you and it looks like they're talking to the guy next to you. Okay, one who has one eye that is different than the other, whether in place, appearance, one is black, or one of mixed color, and a small one is large. The difference between them is unacceptable. Now we're coming to the nose. Okay, is a Jewish nose acceptable? Otherwise, we wouldn't have any kohanim, I guess. But he's going to say, but you'll see something interesting in a moment. A, one whose bridge of the nose is sunken, even if it's not so sunken to the extent that he could apply ointment to both of his eyes at once. Okay, let's say you want to put ointment on your eyes. Now, there's a bridge of a nose in between. If it's sunken and you could actually go straight without going over the hump, the bridge of the nose, then there's a problem. But he says if it's sunken, even if it's not so sunken that he can apply ointment to both of his eyes at once, it's still a problem. In the notes, he says this is a machlekes in the Gemara. Some say that it has to be sunken to that extent. Others say not. The Rambam takes the other view. And that's the word charum, which appears in the Chumash. One whose middle of the nose projects upward. Notice the middle of the nose, not the tip of the nose, right? A non-Jewish girl has her nose going up. The Jews have their nose going down usually, right? We're not talking about the tip. We're talking about the middle of the nose. So that's almost like a rhinoceros. I don't know. One whose tip of the nose points downward. Now, what does that mean? Is that a Jewish nose? Obviously, it can't be. I mean, otherwise we'd have no kahana. So it must be that it's sort of more extended and more dramatic than a normal traditional Jewish nose, or Italian nose for that matter. One whose tip of the nose is crooked, one whose nose is disproportionately large. Now, I suppose the question is, how do you define disproportionately? So I guess each case would have to be judged on its own. One whose nose is disproportionately small. Oh, how is it measured? With one's pinky. If one's nose is larger or smaller than his pinky, it is considered a blemish. Okay, take your pinky and put it on your nose. What do you find?
The same length.
Did you know that?
No.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So mine is the same as yours. Unbelievable.
Mm.
Your nose is much bigger than mine, Dave, but you obviously have a bigger pinky too.
Yeah.
So everything's relative. Very interesting. 8, 3 involving the lips. If the upper lip extends beyond his lower lip, lower lip extends beyond the upper lip, when his mouth hangs loosely and so his spittle is constantly descending from his mouth. 3, involving the belly, one whose belly is swollen. Doesn't mean overweight. I hope not. Actually, a Kohen could not be too overweight. Why not? We discussed this once before. Who remembers? Because the Kohen had to wash his hands and feet from the basin at the same time. You have to bend down and touch his feet. Now, if you have a big book, that's a problem. Right?
Yeah.
One whose navel projects outward rather than being concave like that of other people. That's not so uncommon. Huh?
Yeah.
Have you been into the locker room? Into the men's locker room, guys?
Yeah.
You ever look at other people's pupik? What did you? So normally it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's impressed within the body. Like when a baby's born, then it's protruding. But usually that changes. See one whose breasts are extended and lie on his stomach like the breasts of a woman. Again, I'm assuming it doesn't just mean that a guy has what they call today, I think they call it male boobs. A guy who's overweight, that sometimes occurs. I think this is more than that, I would imagine. 10, 3 involving the back, the spine is crooked, vertebra slipped out of the spinal column, whether it's projected outward or inward or to the side. Bale chatoteret. A hunchback, even though a vertebrae has not slipped from its place, still a blemish. So I know some very fine people who are hunched, and but and some of them are very wise rabbis, actually, I know. And I would be happy to consult such a person and stand up when he walks by me. But still, I could understand that it's pasnit that he should be the palace guard. 11, 6 involving the hands, one who has an extra finger, even if he has 6 on each hand. If he cuts the extra one off, it's acceptable, but if it had a bone and it left the bone, it's unacceptable. Oh, even if he cuts it off. One who's missing a finger, one who has 2 fingers webbed and connected until below the joint. They're connected, yeah. If you cut and separate it in the joint, it's okay. Which joint? The first joint next to the palm of one's hand. One whose fingers are bent over each other permanently. One who has a projection emerging from his thumb. And this one I struggle with. F, a left-handed person. Now I've studied this maybe 30 times, and it's the first time it hit me that a lefty cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash if he's a kohen. I mean, I have a son and a son-in-law, maybe 2 sons that are lefties. One is a full lefty, one is ambidextrous. Ambidextrous is acceptable. So what's wrong with a lefty? Any left-handed people here? Do you consider yourself blemished? God forbid. What's wrong with lefties? As I say, some of my best friends, some of my kids are lefties. So, well, why is that a blemish? Any ideas?
Maybe for pouring something or some, that should be poured with the right hand.
That's
But if you're
interesting. That's interesting. That's a very good idea. Thank you, Dave. It says that a sofer, a scribe, should not be a lefty. Because when you write a Torah or parchments for tefillin or mezuzah, just the way you're writing, practically it's better if you're right-handed. So that's for purely practical reasons. Maybe because we write from right to left in Hebrew. So if you're a lefty, maybe there's more of a chance that you'll smudge the letters. I'm not sure exactly, but it says explicitly that a lefty should not be a sofer, a scribe. One of my sons is a lefty, and he's actually the most artistic of all my kids. But being a scribe is a different story. So maybe the pouring, that's a interesting suggestion. So I consulted my colleagues actually on this one, and one of my very wise colleagues, Rabbi Levi Weinberg, who's a big scholar, Rosh Yeshiva, and he knows Kabbalah as well and Chassidus, he said that in Jewish mysticism, right stands for chesed and left stands for gevura. So too much emphasis on gevura, on justice, rather than kindness, could be dangerous. That's an interesting idea. And one other one said that because it's the minority of people are left-handed, so it's in a sense not normal, so to speak. And again, therefore, maybe it might cause people to look, I'm not sure. Okay, 4, involving the reproductive organs, one who has a very large and long scrotum that reaches his knees, oy vey. One whose organ is so long that reaches his knees, triple oy vey. One whose membranes surrounding his testicles were crushed, one whose membranes surrounding are inflated, and this is the word miruach. It says meroyach oshech in the Chumash. That's what it means in the list of blemishes for the Kohen. 15, involving the thighs and the legs. Bow-legged, you know those cowboys from riding the horse? Bow-legged to the extent that even when he stands with his feet together, his knees will not touch each other. One whose ankle bone projects outward. That's the round bone above the heel. One whose heel juts outward. This, I didn't understand what this means. Maybe you guys have an idea. C, one whose heel juts outward to the extent that his shin appears to be in the center of his foot. Anybody help me here? What does that mean exactly? I don't get it, to be honest.
Just an abnormality.
Yeah, but what does it mean that his shin appears to be in the center of his foot?
I agree. I think it's just an abnormality, some deformation of some type.
Yes, it is, clearly. The question is, what does it look like that the shin appears to be?
I can't even imagine. It doesn't.
Can you visualize this? Sorry,
No, I can't. Not at all. I don't know what. I can't actually visualize it. I can't imagine what that might look like.
That's my point. I was struggling with that as well. Okay. Someone whose feet are wide like ducks, but not webbed. One has a projection emerging from his large toe. I hope this doesn't mean bunions. Maybe it does. We'll look at 15 in a moment. One who has an extra toe, even 6 on each foot. If he cuts the one off, it's acceptable, provided it doesn't have bone, the same as the hand we read. One who's lacking, he only has 4 toes instead of 5. The toes are bent over each other. It's the same as we had at the hand, just with the foot. One whose toes are webbed until below the joint. He cut and separated, it's fine. One whose foot is entirely straight. Now, our feet are different, right? The front is narrow, the middle is what, the back, it's not a straight. Our feet are shaped, they're molded. Think of a pair of shoes. It's not just a straight block. But if your foot is entirely straight, that the width of the forefoot and the toes is the same as the width of his heels, that's a problem. And if it's the other way, that the foot is curved, like a bow. One whose foot is hollow His midfoot is upraised above the earth as if he's standing on his heel and his toes. Anybody have, isn't there a medical term for that today that we use?
Yeah, I think there is. I'm
The
trying to.
opposite of flat feet.
Yes. I'm trying to think of the term.
I think there is a term for it. I can't.
There is, I think, yes.
Flat feet is where it does not, usually it's raised a little bit in the middle, but here it's
Raised
Raised
arches.
raised arches. Okay, but this is maybe extremely raised arches. One whose ankles click with each other when he walks. One whose knees click with each other when he walks. What do you mean click with each other? My knees do click. I have some arthritis in my knees, so they do click when I bend my knees sometimes.
No,
What
this
do you
is.
mean
This
they
is
what does it mean they click with each
Like
other?
knock knees. Knock
Is
knees.
it not when they touch each
What
other?
does knock knees mean?
That they bend inwards and they touch each other when they walk. They
Yeah.
click.
They actually touch each other.
Yeah.
So they're clicking because they're hitting each other.
Touching each other, yes.
Against each other, yes.
Okay, left-footed is also a problem. What foot does Messi kick with?
Left.
Don't all these stars use both their feet? Depending where the ball is.
Yeah.
Is Messi left-footed?
I don't know, but I think most of his goals are left kicked.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, he's not a Kohen. Okay. There are four that involve the entire body. The trunk of the body is disproportionately larger than his limbs, meaning his arms and legs, or smaller, extremely tall, or a dwarf. Now, normally tall is it's nice to be tall, dark, and handsome, right? So what is the definition of extremely tall? So he says a tall person is considered attractive, but exceptionally tall is objectionable. So does that mean that every NBA basketball player could not serve in the temple? In my days when I followed basketball, the tallest guy in basketball was Wilt Chamberlain. You ever heard of him? Anyway, Wilt Chamberlain was 7'1". And people used to always meet him and say, "Hey, how's the weather up there?" Got sick and tired of that question. So you know what he did? Whoever asked him that question, he would spit on them and say it's raining. But I mean, you see, people are so tall they have to duck to get into the house. So maybe in basketball it's an advantage, but maybe it would be unacceptable in the temple.
Dov Shefts and his late brother.
Nah, well, they're 6'6". That's not.
Are they short?
That's fine. I'm sure 6'6" is fine. 8 involving the skin. A Cushite. No, what's a Cushite? In Israel, an African is called a Cushi. So we have African Jews in Johannesburg and Cape Town. There are Jews who've converted. There are Africans who've converted to Judaism. I've seen them in shul.
Yeah.
But none of them are Kohanim, I promise. Don't worry. Because they're converts. No convert can be a Kohen. Kohen has to be from the father, Kohen all the way back to Aaron. An albino whose skin is white like cheese, or one who is red-skinned like scarlet, or one who has pure blotches on his skin. It's like tsaras. Bohak is a term with tsaras. Will the appearance of the skin change because of an external factor like the scarring from a burn? One who has a facial mole that has hair, even if it's not the size of an isar. An isar is a small coin, like like maybe like a 2 rand coin. One who has a facial mole the size of an isar or more, or one afflicted with warts, when a person's flesh or skin should distend, or the fluids in the skin should distend any part throughout the body, it's a blemish. 4 other blemishes: one who's deaf, one who's intellectually or emotionally unstable, what we would call in Yiddish a meshugana, an epileptic, even if his seizures come at far intervals. Can you imagine he's in the middle of serving and he gets a fit, God forbid? And emotionally, one who suffers from severe depression, whether on a consistent basis or from time to time. That could also be, I mean, you know, in the army, someone who suffers from depression would not be accepted into the army if he volunteered. And to conclude, there are a total of 140 blemishes. How do we get 140? We just did 90. Because yesterday you had 50 that were common to man and beast. So 50 and 90 is 140. 8 involving the head, 2 the neck, 9 the ears, 5 the eyebrows, 7 the eyelids, 19 the eyes, 9 the nose, 9 the mouth, 3 the belly, 3 the back, 7 the hands, 16 the reproductive organs, 20 the legs, 8 the entire body, 8 the skin, 7 the body's strength and odor. That you learned yesterday. The person has a bad body odor, it's a problem. The following disqualify a priest because of the impression they may create. One who has lost the hair of his eyelids even though the roots remain. One whose teeth have been removed. So what does it mean because of the impression they make? Meaning this is not part of the 140. This is 2 additional ones. In other words, in essence, it's not such a blemish, but because it creates an impression and people are going to stare and people are going to question, it's not acceptable. Okay, those 4 were pretty straightforward. Any questions?
No. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, so I'll wish you a good day and a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and to you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shavua Tov.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
something next week.
Bye-bye, Rabbi.